talk about the downgrade for the first time in history of U.S. credit by the agency Standard & Poor's. Why did S&P drop the rating?
They lack faith that the U.S. government has the political will and the kind of disciplined policymaking to deal with our debt problem and deal with it in a responsible way. And as a result, they feel that we are no longer a AAA rating. We're no longer an ultra-safe form of debt for investors around the globe to hold, and so they downgraded us to AA instead of AAA.
What about the congressional debt and deficit bill on Tuesday? Did that have any effect here?
Well, I think what they were disappointed in is not that the bill was passed. Obviously, if it had not passed and we had defaulted on our debts, that would have been even worse. But they felt that the process that got there was not one that suggested that there's going to be a reasoned and steady progress toward deficit reduction over time. It's not that the U.S. is incapable of paying its debts. The problem they identified is that we may lack the political will, the governance, the kind of good political decision-making to get there and arrive there in an orderly way.
How is this going to affect interest rates?
We don't know for sure. We'll find out starting next week when the markets open Monday morning. But it's hard to imagine it'll be good for interest rates. What could very well happen is that global investors say, you know, maybe if this is no longer a AAA asset, maybe I want to demand a higher interest rate to hold this debt. So it might mean the U.S. government has to pay more to borrow money, and those rates tend to trickle through to other borrowers. So if you're trying to get a mortgage, if you're a company trying to take out a loan, this could translate into higher interest rates across the board.
And what about the other rating agencies?
They have so far not been inclined to downgrade. Standard & Poor's has been more aggressive than the other two major ones, Moody's and Fitch. The question is what it would take for the others to take the same approach and also downgrade. We don't know quite what that line looks like, but if we continue to have a very divisive political process and an unwillingness in Washington to arrive at a deficit reduction approach or strategy, then you can imagine the other rating agencies cutting their ratings as well.
So we were at AAA, we're now at a AA plus. What would need to happen to get that AAA rating back?
It's hard to know. These are very opaque processes. We don't know for sure exactly what the line is for Standard & Poor's, what they would need to see to change their mind. What we do know is historically, when a country has been downgraded, it takes time. It's not as if you can be downgraded and then a month later it gets reversed. These tend to be multi-year processes. And the question is, do we, over the next few years in the United States government, is there a steady process toward more thoughtful deficit reduction than we've had so far?
What kind of impact do you think this could have on the international economy?
It's again hard to say. We've never seen this before. We don't know quite what will happen.
Right.
What we do know is that when there's disruptions in the financial system, it's hard to predict. So if you remember when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt in September of 2008, there was no obvious reason that should have caused a global financial crisis, and yet it did. And U.S. Treasury bonds are deeply entrenched across the world financial system in all kinds of different ways. So people in the government are not expecting some kind of economic collapse starting next week, but they are nervous and know that there's a lot we don't know about how this will play out.
Neil Irwin with The Washington Post. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.